Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Astranti Connect. Today, we are diving into the world of psychodynamic therapy, an approach that explores the unconscious mind and dives into hidden thoughts, feelings, and patterns of behavior that shape our lives in surprising ways. This is one of the most popular and widely talked about approaches. So, whether you are just a psychology enthusiast, interested in mental health, or maybe you're a mental health professional in the making, either way, you're going to want to stick around for this one. In this video, we're going to talk about what psychodynamic therapy is. We're going to break down its key concepts, and then we're going to show you what it looks like in practice with some really realistic scenarios. So let's get started. So, what is psychodynamic therapy? Imagine your mind as an iceberg. The very small part that you're aware of is the bit above the water's surface, but the majority of the iceberg is hidden underwater. Psychodynamic therapy explores that hidden part, or the unconscious, and it explores how it affects our everyday feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. Historically, this approach can be traced back to Freud and his concepts that were rooted in psychoanalysis. You may have heard terms such as the id, the ego, and the superego. Don't worry if you haven't. Although this approach has developed a lot since then, it still has its core beliefs that the unconscious drives a lot of what we feel and do. Now, let's break down some of the key concepts. So, a big one in psychodynamic therapy is unconscious conflicts. For example, let's say you've had a difficult experience in childhood. Maybe you felt a lot of abandonment or you faced a lot of self doubt. You might not think about it consciously, but these feelings from childhood could get repressed or pushed below the surface. These thoughts are then taken into our unconscious. They don't just vanish. Instead, they'll come back up and creep below the surface, especially in times of high stress or maybe when we're dealing with difficult relationships. As an example, imagine you're trying to hold a beach ball underneath the water's surface. It's going to be a lot of effort, and eventually it's going to pop back up when you least expect it. That's how repressed feelings work in the unconscious. They'll come back up, especially in times of high stress, tension, or when something is triggering us in the present. The next core concept we have is transference. Now, this one is a big one in psychodynamic therapy. Essentially, it's when a patient will transfer their thoughts and feelings about a past relationship onto their therapist. As an example, if somebody had really critical parents, we might expect that same criticism to come from the therapist too, even though in reality it wouldn't. And this can reveal a lot about how we relate to others. For example, if somebody had really critical parents, they might expect that same criticism to come from their therapist as well. And this can reveal a lot about how we relate to other people. Then there's countertransference. So, this is when the therapist might unconsciously bring their own stuff into the therapy session. A really good example of countertransference is if a therapist has had issues with their own self doubt, they might overcompensate by being overly supportive to the patient. With countertransference, therapists have to work really hard to keep self aware and stay on track of their responses in order to stop these issues from happening and stay focused on the client. For example, with us at Astranti Connect, all of our courses will come back to this core concept of self awareness. And our CPCAB Level 2 course kicks off with sessions that are mostly about you as the therapist. This is in order to uncover and acknowledge any biases you may have. And this is a really key theme throughout your whole career as a therapist, and it's something that you'll always be working on. So now we've broken down those key concepts, what does psychodynamic therapy actually look like in practice? Well, psychodynamic therapy is non directive. So, as opposed to quite directive forms of therapy and approaches such as CBT, psychodynamic therapy might let the conversation flow naturally. This means that clients are encouraged to talk really freely in their sessions, and this is called free association. It's all about exploring whatever comes up, even if it seems irrelevant or random. As an example, if somebody recently had quite a bad argument with their friend, a psychodynamic therapist might talk about how those thoughts and feelings might have been triggered by their past. It's all about connecting these dots between past and present. Now, let's unpack a really dense example. So, let's say we have a client called Sarah. She's in her 30s and she's struggling a lot with anxiety, and that seems to be popping up a lot in her relationships. While Sarah is in therapy, she often realizes that she ends up pushing people away because of this fear of abandonment before they get too close. During her sessions, Sarah starts connecting these fears to an experience that she had early on in life, where she had an unreliable caregiver who would leave her alone for hours at a time or for really long periods. And then from that in therapy, Sarah might realize that her anxieties aren't just about her current relationships, but they're tied to those deep rooted relationships that she had early on as a child. So by becoming aware of these patterns, Sarah can then strive to break them. So becoming aware of when she's pushing people away because of anxiety, then she can learn to have healthier coping mechanisms and in a more healthy way connect to other people. With any therapy approach, it's really important to talk about importance and credibility. So why might somebody choose psychodynamic therapy? This approach is particularly helpful if you want to get out of patterns you're stuck in that you don't understand, or you want to get to the root causes of your issues. So it's not just about getting rid of the current symptoms, it's about finding where these issues come from. If you feel like you're always stuck in a bad relationship cycle that happens over and over again, or you're always struggling with something like self doubt, for example, psychodynamic therapy can help you find the root cause of these problems and then eliminate them. So, finally, to recap, psychodynamic therapy digs into your unconscious mind and it helps clients recognize patterns of behavior that are rooted in past experiences. As an approach, it's much less about a quick fix and it's more about a deep and meaningful change over time. The goal is never just symptom relief, it's usually self understanding and growth, and that can be really empowering. If this approach sounds like something you'd like to know more about, I'd really encourage you to dive deeper. There are so many great books, online courses, and other resources that can help you learn more about psychodynamic therapy. And of course, if you are considering therapy yourself, it's worth finding a licensed therapist who can assist you and guide you on your journey. Therapists will use a really wide range of techniques and approaches. So, if you're considering therapy, it's really important you understand the difference between these approaches. If you'd like to know more about what the other therapeutic approaches are, check out our other videos on person centered therapy, CBT, and family systems therapy, to name but a few. And thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more mental health and therapy content. And we will see you next time.